An election reform push here in Michigan could redefine your trip to the ballot box.
A potential change that has a number of county clerks worried about the implications, which involve a surprise target: churches across the state.
And that means it may become more difficult for Michigan clerks to find polling places. 13 on your side's Charlie Tinker is here now with what we know about the ballot initiative currently gathering signatures. Charlie?
Hey guys, we've seen and obviously heard about election reform basically from A to Z since this time last year, most notably probably the voter ID piece of this. But yeah, it's what actually might happen to those churches. It's really rattling nerves. It's been the status quo for generations, but a controversial idea could change where and how you next cast that vote.
The Secure My Vote ballot initiative is a sweeping policy change.
The last provision of the petition language clearly says the initiative would prohibit donations to fund elections.
We wanted to look into some of the different provisions within the proposed changes and see how they could impact election administration.
What that hard look by Progress Michigan revealed was that a full 1 in 5 of the state's stable of polling places would be disqualified under a ban on so-called in-kind contributions.
We could see the cost of simply obtaining a polling place increase costs by thousands of dollars. Clerks cannot apply for grants. This is creating problems seemingly out of thin air.
It's certainly going to be a significant resource challenge for our communities.
In Ottawa County, Clerk Justin Roebuck says they rely even more heavily on private, mostly donated spaces after moving out of local schools on account of security concerns several years ago. A whopping 60% of those hubs from Georgetown to Holland to Grand Haven were churches in 2020. In Kent, the number is around 50%. In Kalamazoo, 49%.
One of my concerns with the proposal in general is that while it limits the resources available to election officials, it does not provide adequate funding. The scope of this is way more broad than I think, hopefully, was intended in terms of removing that element of communities simply just supporting one another.
Those numbers are publicly available. We did independently confirm them. A church like any old church could mean hundreds, if not more than $1,000 in rental fees, Nick.
And Charlie, there's another aspect of this concern out there we learned you can talk about. The in-kind contribution piece of this ballot initiative could, in effect, ban volunteers.
Yeah, it's very much out there. Secure My Vote. They did tell the Free Press that was not the intent. Once it's passed, what we're learning from experts, though, it's broad enough. The act of interpreting and making those determinations would likely be left to the courts or to the legislature to game out, which is why you're hearing opponents wanting a rewrite before it ever gathers those 340,000 signatures and is brought to Lansing for a vote.
All right, Charlie, thank you very much. A little more on this now. Secure My Vote's authors appear to have built this up by mirroring similar legislation. Senate Bill 0284 specifically mentions in-kind contributions. That was a bill co-sponsored by State Senator Kurt Vanderwall. In hindsight, he told us he'd be open to changes and that removing places like churches and those inter-community donations from the equation was not at all the intention behind his bill.
The number one is to making sure that we have the proper amount of locations. And we're going to have to look at some of that if we need to tweak some of that language. I'm open to that. It's certainly not our intention to limit opportunities.
Vanderwall said he'd be open to amending this if or when it reaches Lansing to narrow that definition. He'd also be open to exploring budgeting for the change. While Vanderwall says places like churches are an unintended target, he still does not want multi-million-dollar gifts coming in from private donors to facilitate elections on either side.